Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth. This is episode 5, and today we really have a building block of finances here. So, today's episode is all about emergency funds. So, we're going to talk a bit about what it is, how much we think you would need, where do you put it, and its general benefit that it can have to your life. So, I'm here also with Alex. So, let's get cracking.
Hi Alex and hi everybody, and yeah, welcome back to the show. And today we're going to be talking through emergency funds. So I think probably if I start with what is an emergency fund, so it's a pot of cash, for want of a better word, that is there to protect you against all of life's what can be bumps in the road. So it's something to be saved, easy access in a high interest in kind of high interest, easy access savings account. And if your boiler were to break, if your car were to break, name any of these annoyances, it is there to protect you against having to reach to the credit card and go into debt to pay for these. It's there to give you peace of mind, knowing that if any of these uneventualities happen, that you're then going to be in a good position where you can pay for it. You've got peace of mind. You can carry on. Not to say it's annoying that you have to pay for these things, but it's not. The idea is it's not a disaster and it doesn't derail you financially.
Yeah, sure. I think the main thing in life is that unpredictable things happen all the time. I mean, nobody plans for like you say, like an emergency car repair, or you have an accident of some sort, or you get a leaky pipe somewhere, and then you can very quickly have to put your hands on quite a lot of cash to rectify the issue. Something like being without heating or hot water, especially in winter, can be really horrible for a family, especially if you've got young children around or elderly parents or something, grandparents living with you. So really, an emergency fund at its core, its essence is really to get you out of a pickle, to reduce some of that anxiety, to help you sleep at night, knowing that actually, if you do have something unforeseen happen to you, you can solve it. Yes, it hurts paying out a little bit of the money that you've saved or a lot of the money that you've saved. But it's, as Alex says, it's much, much better to do that than it is to have to borrow or to not be able to fix the thing or do the thing in the first place. So everyone talks about different amounts of emergency funds and where to store it, and we're going to break each of those down. So, in my opinion, Alex, and I'm just thinking that we didn't discuss what each of us thinks is a useful amount of an emergency fund before we hit record. So, in my opinion, it should be 6 months of your expenses, and whether that's £6,000, £12,000, £3,000, who knows. It doesn't have to be the full amount to begin with. Obviously, you save it up over time. Even having a few £100s can get out of trouble if you need it. So, Alex, what would you say a decent amount of emergency fund would be? How many months are we talking?
Yeah, and I like the 6 months. I think for me it's anywhere between 3 and 6 months, and there's a couple of factors. I think one is job security. I think if you're say self-employed or in a job where there may be unpredictable hours or unpredictable pay, having more of an emergency fund, so more of your expenses covered, so more leaning towards the 6 months is, I would say, advisable. If you're a bit more secure or you've got in terms of your employment, because I think the way to look at it and the acid test is if you were to lose your job tomorrow, what would how long could you last? And so if you're in a salaried employment, if you were to lose your job, you more than likely would be given severance pay or redundancy pay as part of that. So as opposed to if you're self-employed and say a contractor and they say on the Friday, don't come back on Monday, there's no safety net. But I think anywhere between 3 and 6 months is really solid. I personally keep 3 months of expenses in my savings accounts, but I think it's very personal to each individual. And if you've got any from 3 months, you can easily build up to your 6 months, and there's definitely benefits of having the kind of more money saved up there, so a bit more flexibility. And if you wanted to take maybe a little bit of time off or uh, trade down a job, so you're not as stressed out, it just provides you that little bit more flexibility. But yeah, in short, for me, anywhere from 3 to 6 months in and around that range is ideal.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought, or I didn't think of job security. So, like where I work in nursing, shifts, bank shifts, agency work is plentiful. So maybe 6 months for me is too much. Maybe I should be on around the 3 month kind of amount. I also wonder if people who like you say don't have that job security, or who consult, who run their own business. So I've got a lot of friends who work in the trades. They're plumbers, electricians, carpenters, etc. And if they don't put the work in, they're not going to get paid. Like, they don't have sick pay, they don't have holiday pay or anything like that. If they're not actually swinging spanners or cutting wood, or I don't know, gluing wood or whatever else they do, fixing lights, they're actually not going to get paid. So there's an argument there, I think, for someone who's self-employed to have a bit more of an emergency fund, perhaps beyond 6 months, just to tide them over. So if they have any kind of injury or something at work, because they do sometimes dangerous work, they don't have to panic for a couple of months. They can rest, recuperate, and then ease themselves back into work. I might ask some of my pals actually what they have or what they don't have, and it might turn into a conversation or not. Okay, so we've established that we need some money. Having some money is better than no money in the case of an emergency. Second up, where do you store it? So you can store it in many places. I just wouldn't advise cash under a pillow or buried in the garden somewhere. It should be in a bank account or somewhere electronic, I would say. There are many places and many suggestions about where you should store it. Do you pick a high interest cash saver at your local bank? Do you pick one of the online banks to save it in? Do you pick a bank account with a higher interest rate that you've never heard of? Do you invest it in the market, knowing that perhaps using a credit card could buy you 30 days to a month of that? It's a bit of a minefield. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on storing emergency funds, ease of access, and leverage?
Yeah, I think it's a good list actually of where you can store it. My preference is always to have an easy access savings account, because ultimately you're going to, if you need these funds, it needs to be easy to access. And there's kind of a couple of types of account that fall into that bucket. One is just a standard easy access savings account, and that it would be clear from a good example of those is maybe like Marcus savings account or Chase. There are also bank accounts where they have limited withdrawals per year. So you might be able to get two or three penalty-free withdrawals within a year, and then after you've exceeded those, the interest rate falls. But that's also quite suitable for emergency fund, because you want to avoid the temptation of using it to spend on frivolities, like going on using it to go on holiday, or treat yourself to some new clothes. It's definitely not for that. And so these semi easy access, for want of a better word, is they can be really suitable. And I think it's important to note that these accounts aren't there to make you rich. They're not going to be the key to your financial freedom. They're there for a safety net. And with the interest rates, cash is the enemy of cash is inflation. So the higher inflation is, the value of that cash is being eroded. So earning some interest just helps offset in or hopefully fully offsets inflation. And it's another reason to keep it in some form of bank, as opposed to keeping it as cash in your cupboard or under the mattress, because that's earning nothing and it's actually losing money every time, as every day goes by. And so, how about you, Alex? Where do you keep yours, and what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. That's just you raised a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about. So I'll just answer your question, then I'll dig a bit into that. So I am a bit lazy with mine. I've kept mine with the Marcus account by Goldman and Sachs. Other savings accounts are available. Do your own research, etc. I keep it there just because it's easy to access. At the time, it was paying me the most interest. At the time of recording, and I checked it before hitting record, it's paying me 4.6%, which is obviously less than inflation, but it's helping to reduce that loss. And it's the money that really reduces anxiety I have about coming home and finding my washing machine's chucked its contents all over the floor, or a different pipe has burst, or I mean, I live in a terraced house, so part of my structure of my building is linked to my neighbours as well. So I just hope that nothing happens like that. And it really allows me to sleep soundly at night, not worrying about those things. So that's its core purpose. I was just thinking, you said something interesting about notice accounts earlier. So, say someone listening decides they need 6 months living expenses, or nine, for example, if they work in the trades or something like that. Could they? I mean, they could, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. They could put the majority of their fund, say 6 months, in an interest account that pays a better rate of interest, but you need 3 months' notice to get your money out. And then you could have 3 months sat in a as higher interest account as you can, because that bridges the gap that you'll need to get your money out of the higher interest account. And usually they pay more more interest to you. So you might earn 1.5%, 2% in some cases more interest doing it that way around, especially if your pot is sizable. So I think with a little bit of planning, and yeah, it's an extra step, but it might net you a few hundred extra pounds per year that you've not had to work for. So do you think is it worth the effort, Alex, do you think, for doing something like that? And since you asked me where I store mine, I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question and really good point. I'll take the second one first. I use the Chip Bank, so they're a fairly new provider, and they're paying just 4.84 the last time I looked before the show. The one thing I would just mention to the listeners is a good email to sign up to is something called Money Facts, and that is you'll get a weekly email, a roundup of best savings accounts, not just the easy access, but the notice accounts, which we'll come on to in a sec, mortgages, loans. So really useful. They do all the hard work of comparing the market, and especially where the it's quite a competitive environment at the minute. There's a lot of change a lot of change week to week. But I do tend to move my savings around, uh, probably not as much as I should do in theory, but I've probably had about 5 or 6 providers over the last year just to eke out that those extra bits of cash. But just on to the first question and the point on if you've got a sizable emergency fund, so say if you do have say 9 months, you are probably very unlikely to need all 9 months worth of cash at one go unless there is a real disaster. And so what you say about locking your money away or like on these notice accounts which give 2-3 months notice to get your money out, I think is a really good idea actually. And even though it does and almost then have a buffer kept in an easy access account, I guess in terms of you'll just have to do a bit more research on which are the best, who are paying the best rates, and knowing that once you've put into a notice account, if they tend to keep the interest rate fixed for that time period. So if rates did go up in the meantime, you potentially lose out on a bit of interest. But I guess the way to look at it and what's the effort is what's the difference in interest between putting my money away in a fixed and keeping part of it into an easy access, and what's that extra interest. It'll probably take you, might take an hour or 2 hours, but it could potentially, if you can net an extra 200-300 pounds of interest per year, especially if you're looking at 6 months worth of expenses, it's quite a lot of money. That's a decent hourly rate to put to invest a little bit of time. And with companies like Moneyfacts who do a lot of the comparison work for you, you can easily identify the best opportunities. So yeah, for sizable amounts, I think it's definitely worth considering. And yes, you're probably it's unlikely to need, you know, 9 months worth of expenses all in one go. It would be much more if you were to be off work, and in which case you can, give notice, and you've, as you said, almost ladder your savings to help you out there. So yeah, I think it's a really good point actually.
Thanks. And I think you again made me think of a different kind of point that I wanted to bring up as well that we again haven't discussed before. But if you say you have 9 months worth of expenses in one go, that would have to be for me something pretty catastrophic to happen, which is probably going to be covered by either car insurance, house insurance, something like that, possibly life insurance if you can't work due to ill health. That's the type of thing like an income protection policy would kick in if you arranged it to help bridge that gap. So it would have to be something really unexpected and something uninsured for you to need that much money. But if you want to take a 9 month holiday when you switch jobs or something, or you need some extra flexibility to find the right kind of job for you, that's when it can really come into its own. And I have actually an example of this. When I switched my last nursing job, it took an awful lot of time for my some of my checks, my DBS check, to come back. And because I had this extra pot of money around, I didn't have to take an in between job. And I'm not saying it didn't take 9 months to come back, but it took, I think, 2, 3 months, something like that. And I didn't have to run out and get an emergency agency shift or go and find a job for a little bit just to tide me over, because I knew if I was a little bit more frugal and I would not need to go and do that. So really, it's a bit of breath of fresh air, and it happened in over summer, which was I had most of June and July off, which was actually really nice. I really enjoyed it, and having that freedom really is the dividend for putting in the hard work, as you say. And you also say that saving £200-300 for a couple of hours work is a good hourly rate. It is. It's incredible. But some people would make that £100-150 from swapping a bank account. People are prepared to do that. So it would be the same amount of work to set up a direct debit or a standing order to a savings account for 25, 50, 100, £200 a month to start building your emergency fund. And once you see that as an expense till it's built up, you're probably not going to miss it. And if you can't do the whole thing in one go, then build it slowly. I mean, I took me months and months and months to put together my emergency fund, probably years actually. Now I think about it, and it's not something that I've just had overnight. And it's really been beneficial to both me and my wife to know that that's there, because it just takes a whole load of pressure off. And Alex, you've recently had an example of where your emergency fund saved some hot water for you and a bit of anxiety, perhaps worry or something. So, are you happy to dip into that, or is there anything else you wanted to say just about storing or emergency funds?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to. I think you hit on a really good point around what's one of the benefits, and it's that the time it takes to find the right job, and by it by having an emergency fund, I think it works two ways. You're not if your current job you know is causing you like severe mental health problems, or you're really not enjoying it, it gives you the breathing room to actually leave and look for something else that's proper. Or if alternatively you decide it's, for career reasons, to move to a different place, it just gives you that breathing room to look for something. And I had a similar thing for me. Started a new job in February. Left my old one just beginning of January, and took most of January off. And it allowed me. I went actually traveling to India with my dad, which was a kind of once in a lifetime thing. That couldn't have happened if I hadn't built up that savings account. And to your point of building it up steadily, it's brick by brick, just investing, a couple of £100, £150 a month, and putting that into your emergency fund. It's very unlikely that you'll miss it if you just treat it as spent money. And then after a few months, you really start to see the momentum build, and it's really encouraging when you start to see that build up, and yeah, the benefits are absolutely massive. So yeah, I just wanted to add that onto your remark, and before I can talk about my plumbing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've been banding some figures about of say £50, £100, £200, whatever per month, and there might be some of you thinking that actually, oh, I've probably only got 20 quid left over at the end of the month. This guy doesn't know anything about what it's like to be me, and actually, I've been there before. I've been to the point where I've had literally £5 left in my bank account, and my electric meter's gone off, and I've had to use it for to keep my fridge on. And we're not saying you need to put £50 in minimum. It can be five, it can be 10, it can be whatever change you have left in a jar to help build this up. Because any amount you have means you have to borrow less, and the freedom that provides is massive. So, Alex, over to you for some emergency plumbing.
Yeah, absolutely. So a real example which happened August, luckily, so the weather wasn't too cold, but um, was just heading out to work one morning. My partner went upstairs just by fluke to get something she left on her desk, and heard what she thought was some ticking. It turned out, opened up the boiler cupboard, and there was water dripping from the boiler and had soaked the kind of bottom of the airing cupboard, and called the emergency plumber. And I was saying just before we went live, I really wish I'd have trained to be a plumber. These guys can charge. So ended up a couple of had an emergency plumber, then had to wait for a part to be delivered to potentially it was unknown that I was going to fix it at this point. Then half a day's work for the plumber fixing the boiler with the new part, and just over £700 later, we managed to have hot water, and we were back on track. And touch wood, it's been a couple of months, and we have been fine and having warm showers. But although, and this is where the emergency fund really comes into its own, because people always give the example of, oh yeah, but what if your boiler breaks? Um, and that did actually happen. So both me and my partner have got emergency funds, and it meant, although it was very annoying to have to pay it, it wasn't a disaster. We weren't reaching for credit cards. We weren't. It didn't push us over the edge. It just meant that we just had the hassle of finding the right plumber and waiting for parts to be delivered and them to be fitted, so we get the water back. So a couple of cold showers um, was kind of the only pain that we had, to be honest. So I said really just helped to just alleviate any stress over and above the immediate kind of discomfort. Is what the is what that emergency fund helped us achieve.
Yeah, it's really poignant, isn't it? But imagine that had happened in the middle of winter and you had, I don't know, some young children around. It would just make it so much more of a headache if you didn't have that available. And luckily, you've been able to. I'm making an assumption here that you split it with your partner and took just half the money from each. I don't know. And you're right, plumbers can charge when they know that their services are needed. And other tradespeople are masters of that thing of, oh, this is going to be very expensive. Let's get your, I don't know, get your wallet out or whatever. But actually, we needed, or in this case, you needed a skill that you didn't possess. I wouldn't be able to do plumbing either. I'd phone a plumber too. And if they need your skills are in demand, you can charge like that. So they weren't all plumbers all the time. So if you do want to earn some extra money, perhaps you can learn a bit of that and be able to fix it yourself in the future, or do some home mechanics or something. So it's just something that is really a timely thing that's happened. And now that we're talking about emergency funds, for you to bring it up, but I'm going to ask you this as you're the maths accountant person between us. But obviously, you've paid it off in one go, paid no credit card interest. But what would it be like if you had to model that as you didn't have that emergency fund and you had to reach for say, a 20% interest on a credit card, which is probably a low estimate now? Some of them would probably be higher, 30, sometimes 40%.
Yeah, so that's it. The alternative would be to go and borrow this, and as you said, 20% even now is, it sounds high, but it's actually pretty conservative. So I mean, just as an example, if it was £700 and you borrow over 2 years at 20%, you're paying just over £840. That's £140 in interest. If you were to be paying that over 4 years, if you couldn't, if you had to stretch it a little bit further, you're paying almost £1,000. You're paying £993. Um, Incredible amount of interest and cost to for almost not having that emergency fund and the cash built up front. So yeah, that's and you say that's fairly conservative. Hopefully, it hammers home the point of how much cost you're avoiding by building up some, building up your buffer and building up your emergency fund.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you take the average wage, that's a lot of like 140, or the extra money, the 300 extra, it's so much extra hours that you'd have to work and extra stress that you'd have to put yourself through to have that. So if you were paying it that way, it's just extra money that you can't put towards something else. And people say about bad things happening in threes because they're a bit superstitious, which I'm not, but brains are prediction engines, and you'd probably equate some negative things happening as part of a group. So, the more you have, the better. And actually, because you've saved that extra money, you're then much better off than somebody who unfortunately has to use a credit card for it. And I wouldn't want to think if the rates were higher or the term was longer, or someone was just paying the minimums off that credit card. It could last years and years and many hundreds of pounds extra. So, any other thoughts on emergency funds, or best practice, or anything else you want to mention before we wrap this one?
Yeah, just a couple of bits I think which would just help complement what we've said already. But you mentioned about trying to even saving the smallest amount of money that you can into an emergency fund is beneficial. And there are a couple of ways where you can try and boost your emergency fund quite quickly. You mentioned one of them before on bank account switches. This is a great way of earning really easy money. So I've done four in the last year and earned over £500 just by switching from accounts. They tend to come and go to keep an eye out on the market, and Martin Lewis is very good at highlighting when the bank account switches come up. But some of them pay up to like £200 for you to switch to them. So it's a nice way of just getting a bit of a boost. There's always things in your house that you don't need or you don't like anymore, don't want anymore. And eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Vinted are all like good ways of just earning, turning some of that unloved stuff into cash. Um, Over the last few months, me and my partner we've had a few things left over in the garage, like an old chair that we sold the other weekend. We sold a fish tank that we no longer had. Even sold some hanging rails from that we used when we first moved into our house. We had to get some temporary hanging rails in place of wardrobes because we had to gut the place, and we sold those. They were like £10 per rail. So you can. There's things around your house that you may not think is worth something, but is actually worth something to someone. Old like spirit bottles, like gin bottles, and anything with a nice design, they seem to sell for, you get 4 or 5 quid for some of these, and for an empty bottle. So it's worth just having a look on eBay or Facebook Marketplace from things that you have that you don't need anymore, looking to sell that. It's a worthwhile pursuit, and that's a can put you a few £100s into your emergency fund as to kind of get you going and hopefully build a bit of momentum. So yeah, that's what I would add to my to I think what's already been a talked a lot about emergency funds, but hopefully that's helpful. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on those suggestions.
Yeah, I do actually. They're really good. And I don't know why I didn't think of this before. Just you jogging my memory about it. That my wife and I did a car boot sale on just one Sunday morning with just things that we no longer needed in our house. So we always have a cardboard box on a bookshelf, and the bookshelf is otherwise empty. And we put things that we don't think we need in there. And if after like 2 weeks we haven't got it back out, then we don't need it. And that gets then sorted into a pile to take to car boot fair. And when we do this over the year, generally we do one, maybe two boot sales per year. And our most recent one we made after the £6 pitching fee, we made like £119. And I couldn't tell you what we got rid of. So it's been nothing massive, nothing I've missed. It's just extra things that somehow we accumulate that finds its home with someone else, and we're at nearly 120 quid better off. So yeah, those are all really good points, especially the selling on eBay vintage type thing, because it reaches so many more people. And yeah, there are a few fees going on, but it's better to have it cash in your pocket than have something that you're no longer using and someone else could get a bargain out of it for sure. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you have any questions on emergency funds, you can email us at nursingyourwaytowealth@gmail.com. Similarly, any thoughts, feedback, positive, negative, we'll read all of it, learn from all of it, and hopefully keep bringing you insightful episodes. So I think that's it from me. Alex, is that it from you?
Yes, that's been, hopefully it's been helpful for the listeners.
Lovely. And thank you for your time, Alex, and thank you for listening to us. And we'll be back with episode 6 shortly. None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.